A few years ago, I asked my son to help me with something, and he responded, "Mom, I need my me time." Well, me time? For a split second, I was back in Trinidad, imagining the look on my mother's face if I tried that line. I think she would have asked me if I'd lost my mind and probably proceeded to wring my ears. So I had to remind myself, I was in America, and wringing my son's ears could become problematic. So at that moment, I realized that my son wasn't being rude. This was about cultural boundaries. In America, a fence draws a line between where your privacy ends and your neighbor's begins. It's a polite signal to mind your own business. In Trinidad, the boundaries I grew up with were more porous. The fences in Trinidad weren't there to keep people out. They were just there so we didn't fight over the mangoes. And even then, that only worked until mango season, because once a branch landed over the fence, suddenly everyone was a lawyer. The trunk is yours, the branch is mine, and if the mango fell naturally, well, then that was an act of God. This was an inherited boundary. No one sat us down to explain it. We just grew up inside it. A similar thing applied to the children in the village. I didn't just belong to my parents. I belonged to the village. Every woman your mother's age or older, regardless of biology, was your auntie. That was the auntie rule. And I think many immigrant cultures, we have this auntie rule. Well, in Trinidad, we have this word mako. It's a person who's deeply and unapologetically in your business. Aunties were the makos. They were the original human AirTag. They didn't need GPS. They didn't need a cell phone app because our fences were see-through and their tracking was always on. As a child, I didn't experience this as control. I experienced this more as belonging. One of my most favorite memories of growing up in Trinidad is celebrating all of the holidays. In America, religion stays neatly in its lane. You're invited to your holiday, you RSVP, you show up. In Trinidad, we didn't just respect boundaries, we let them dissolve. When it was Diwali, the Festival of Lights, the Hindu community didn't just celebrate behind closed doors. They lit the entire street with diyas. For Eid, we were at our Muslim neighbor's house eating sewine, a rich, creamy dessert, so yummy. And then for Christmas, we were listening to Parang, a Trini version of carols, with our Hindu and Muslim friends. And suddenly, the boundary between your religion and mine just dissolved. And then there's Carnival. The entire country is a part of this celebration. Rhythm would just move through the country like a wave. Steel pan beats in your chest, feathers in your face, and music so vibrant it would just tug at your waistline. This is when I learned that my identity wasn't fragile. I was allowed to be many things at once. My identity could be as wide as the village. My mother was an educator, so I knew education was important. But my father, he believed in excellence. When I brought home a graded assignment, one of the first things he'd ask is, "Did you get the highest score?" If the answer was no, I could feel the weight of his disappointment settle on my shoulders. One night, after a lot of corrections, he asked me, "Do you want to raise pigs?" I looked him dead in the eye and I said no. I think my response surprised him, but looking back, I see what was really happening. My dad was trying to enforce a survival boundary, one designed to protect me from poverty. So education became my fence, and perfection became who I thought I needed to be. It took me a long time to realize this, But sometimes the fence that you built to keep you safe can be the very thing that will keep you caged. I feel like in Trinidad, someone always knows your name, and you always feel like you belong. So, in the village, someone knew that I was Fat Gyal's grandchild. By the way, in Trinidad, everyone has a nickname, like Fat Gyal, Bull Terrier, or Purr, that everybody knows. And your legal name, not so much. But when I immigrated to Florida, I crossed into a new boundary system where no one knew my dad was Pops or my mom was Maro. But the rules were clear. Do not fail, do not waste the opportunity, and do not disappoint my family who'd sacrificed so much to get me here. I brought that cage with me. And slowly, without me even realizing it, my identity narrowed down into one single lonely metric, somewhere between my master's degree and that corner office. In America, my worth was measured by results, not by who I was, but what I produced. You know that fence, right? The one where your value is measured by your P&L numbers and your performance reviews? I was sitting in this large office with a stale salad, hitting send on an email at 10 p.m. at night, wondering why I felt successful, yet so alone. Corporate life was rewarding me for my endurance. I was doing great. My job title was proof. My work became my identity. But suddenly, it just didn't feel the same. That's when I realized I wasn't in the village anymore. I was just a part in the corporate machine. And I started to slowly realize that cage, I just swapped it for a different cage. And then I had my son. Isn't he cute? Motherhood collided with my career. I have to say that I was climbing that corporate ladder, but when I had my son, I hit the glass ceiling. All of that work and endurance suddenly didn't matter anymore. I wasn't worth the same thing anymore. And I felt that a part of my identity was missing. I started to question my worth. I had to come to a realization that I couldn't just define myself by corporate success and results. I needed to reevaluate who I was, because motherhood demanded something completely different from me. It required me to show care, to be present, and to have community. So I decided it was time for me to redraw my boundaries. So I chose these guys. I chose family. I chose connection. In Trinidad, a new baby opens the door. Aunties impose the magic turmeric tea that makes you lactate. Food appears, laundry's folded, someone's there to watch the baby while you take a nap. But in America, people are kind. They're more polite. They respect your boundaries. But that respect can leave you completely alone. When our son was born, our parents visited for a week or so, and then, rightly according to the American culture, they went back to their lives. This left my husband and I completely isolated. To survive, we had no choice but to outsource our village. We were lucky though. We found a wonderful in-home daycare run by a woman with Ukrainian roots. She became our village auntie, offering advice and care and a steady guiding hand through our son's early years. And then one day it hit me. I was paying a weekly fee for something I used to get for free. And I realized that I crossed from communal boundaries into transactional ones. So what do I teach my son? I'm teaching him that boundaries aren't just personal preferences, they're cultural systems. Some are inherited, some are imposed, some we have to redraw ourselves. And once I understood this, I realized that it wasn't just a lesson for him, it was a lesson for all of us. If the boundaries you built were there to protect your worth, ask whether they limit your belonging. If the boundaries were built to protect your survival, ask whether or not it's become cages. Because identity isn't something we find alone. It's something we're shaped into by the people who are willing to cross the fence. So I would rather have an auntie makoing my business than to have no one to share my say wine with. So I leave you with this. Boundaries don't just protect us. They shape who we are allowed to become.
Thank you.